Hello Internet, my name is the Golden Stalfos, and today I want to talk about the problem with Viz Media and the way they adapt anime. Um, Now I gotta be honest, Viz has made a lot of shows, and they aren't all subject to this. But the biggest shows, the shonen shows, they fuck up mercilessly. It's not necessarily the same kind of fuck up that Toei does, but it's just as bad, really. Okay, so let me explain. All right. So for anyone who doesn't know, Viz Media is the production company that's in charge of a whole bunch of manga. Like, probably roughly half the manga that is ever published in America goes through Viz Media. And, they're big. um, they're like one of the name brands when it comes to that. There's also, there are others, there's like Tokyo Pop, although I think they went bankrupt a while back. But their name is still on like hundreds of mangas. Yeah. But anyway, uh, Viz Media is big, and they're most well known for the two big shonen series that they got to run as animations. The first is Bleach, and the second is Naruto. Now, Naruto arguably became much more famous because, well, there's a couple of reasons that I'll get to. But basically, the way they added filler wasn't as much of a disruption to Naruto, because Naruto had like these natural like dips in the story where it's supposed to be a time skip, but they fill the gap with filler, and Bleach didn't really have those. Like in Bleach, when they made the show 40% filler and kept adding filler characters into non-filler parts of the story, it just dragged everything down and made it suck. But in Naruto, there's already a huge ensemble cast. In Bleach there is too, but fuck it. But in Naruto, they didn't feel the need to make the filler characters part of the main story, and the filler arcs mostly fit into lulls in the story. Whereas in Bleach, they were just kind of thrown into the middle of a high-octane arc, or right in between two very important arcs for no fucking reason. So that's fun. But anyway, so Bleach ended up getting canceled as an anime because, well, after Aizen, people stopped watching, which makes sense because, let's be honest, that felt like a reasonable stopping point to a lot of people. But that's only because of the way the anime was portraying it. In reality, Aizen wasn't the end boss. He was just a boss, And admittedly, Kubo probably could have handled it better by, like, not building him up quite as much, because he did get built up through, like, 3 arcs before they finally fought. But Aizen is, like, the halfway mark in the story, if that. Actually, way less than that. And so the manga continues, but a lot of that didn't have an anime adaptation. And, yeah. But this is the problem with Viz Media, right? They made both of these shows, which are very good, they made them more than 40% filler, right? Like, let's take part 1 of Naruto as an example. Okay, so up until season 4, you have no real filler. Like, there's an episode here, an episode there, but no arcs, right? Just individual episodes. And and they pad out the episode count with flashbacks. Like, I recently started watching part 1 just for funsies because I wanted to see, I wanted to see it again. And so, as you do, I skipped over the boring intro stuff and started with the Land of Waves on episode 7. And as I was watching, when I got to the very next episode, because I was watching on Netflix, when it automatically skipped the introduction stuff and went directly to the episode, it skipped to 4 minutes and 30 seconds in. And then that's the moment where the episode actually started. 4.5 minutes in. Jesus Christ. Then later on through episode 8, mind you, the 8th episode of the series total, they had 2 full minutes of flashbacks while Naruto was trying to get up the courage to stand in the middle of his fight with Zabuza. Like, that 2 full minutes of flashbacks, that means 6.5 minutes of the episode wasn't even the episode. Like, Jesus Christ, guys. And then there were more flashbacks after that. And the whole series is like that. The episode doesn't start for, 4 minutes later than it should because we gotta remind you about the shit that happened last week. And then we're going to interrupt the episode to remind you about shit that happened earlier in this episode, shit that happened last episode, shit that happened, There's flashbacks inside of flashbacks in this series. It's insane. And then, in addition to the flashbacks, we're going to have tons of still shots where we pan the camera around like a character who's just standing there thinking, and we play dramatic music, but we don't have any voiceover or anything, and it's just like 5 to 10 seconds of that, like 15 times per episode. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. I mean, this episode could be 5 minutes long if you cut all this crap. And it's weird because in the moments where the show is supposed to look good and be badass, it does. Like, during the fight scenes, the Sakuga moments are unbelievably good. Like, I'll say it flat out. The Sakuga in Naruto looks 100 times better than anything in Dragon Ball or One Piece, right? Like, Toei, right? Toei has their own problems with being a shitty company, right? They have no standard for animation, and they don't care about their animators, and they just have the worst work schedule imaginable and horrible working conditions, and they are just a piece of shit company through and through. But they're consistently shitty, right? Like, they don't have filler arcs most of the time. I mean, there's a couple that are like 6 episodes or whatever, but not like full arcs, and they do pad out the runtime, but not like in the same way. Like, they don't waste time with flashbacks. They just draw out the power-up animations and things like that. Actually, in One Piece, they get even more egregious about it, because what they do is they have like a little voiceover narration intro that tells you about the world or some bullshit, and then they have a song, and then they have the here's the shit that happened last week, and then they do a splash screen, and then the episode starts. And in some seasons, that whole process can take 8 minutes off the runtime of an episode. And then, of course, they have the outro, and then they pad that by adding a little section to the end that has nothing to do with the plot, so that they can condense the episode down to just like, 12 minutes of content in the middle of this block of crap. And there's a commercial break with its own animations to see it in and out and everything. And so, One Piece could easily be made half as long without even taking out the filler, which is just fucking embarrassing. But in Naruto, it could be even more dramatic, right? Because not only are there filler arcs and filler episodes, but they also do all of that shit I just mentioned, right? Like every episode ends with the ending theme and then a little song and dance about, like Ninja Academy bullshit. And like some of it's kind of interesting, some of it's like the stuff that would be included as like bonus panels in the manga or whatever. But most of the time it's just there to fill space. And it's just like, man, I need that. And then they don't just do that, they also do the previews for the next episode. So there's like 3 minutes of crap at the end of the episode, 4 minutes of crap at the beginning of the episode, and a similar amount of crap wasted on flashbacks during the episode. Like Jesus Christ. And I mean, I get it. Kishimoto's writing involves a lot of, flashing back and reiterating the same plot points over and over again because he has been writing this for 20 plus years and doesn't trust his audience to remember shit the way other authors do. But it's embarrassingly awful. And it just makes me think of like Dragon Ball Kai, right? Which a lot of people didn't like for some reason, but basically what they did is Toei outsourced animation and storyboarding to a secondary company, and I don't remember that company's name. Sorry, I can look it up, I guess. Well, according to a quick glance at the wiki, it was the studio credit still goes to Toei, but it was licensed by Funimation and ran on Fuji TV, so maybe they're responsible. I don't know. But anyway, I do know that it was a completely different team than the people who did the original Dragon Ball Z runs. And part of what made it so good is that they used a lot of digital animation tools that were becoming popular at the time, and it makes it look really clean and nice. But another thing they did is they made it much closer to the manga, so it like really accurately tells the story and dialogue from the manga, and it cuts out all the filler. And they don't waste a bunch of time on it. They're not trying to drag out the episodes. They're just trying to make the story. And so it ends up being half the length. It looks better. It's more accurate. It takes less time to watch. And it's just good. And also, Dragon Soul, holy shit, Dragon Soul is a bop. Like, don't get me wrong, Dragon Ball has some good opening themes in general, but Dragon Soul blows them all out of the fucking water, man. Like, just completely destroys it. The one they used in the Tournament of Power is pretty good too, but not as good as... No, not quite there. But I think part of the reason it got a bad rap is because this is the version that aired on 4Kids and the CW, kids block of TV after 4Kids stopped being a thing for like years. And of course, on the kids block, they aired the version that, doesn't have blood and stuff like that. And also did some 4Kids dubbing on it, which is oof. But there is a regular Funimation version that, doesn't have those problems, and it's fucking amazing. So, if you ever feel the need to rewatch Dragon Ball, that's the way to go, honestly. um, I mean, there are some filler in Dragon Ball that's like interesting, like Arlia and the Other World Tournament and Cars, but for the most part, it's just like, did we really need fake Namek? Did I mean, do we need all of this shit? I. Why is Vegeta red? Like, ugh. And all of that shit is fixed. So, yeah. But it just makes me wish that some similar treatment could be applied to, like, Viz Media shows, because, like, Naruto didn't die because of all the filler, right? Because, like I said, the way it happened, right? So they paced the show very slowly to begin with. They added tons of padding to each episode, to pad out the runtime. But up until the middle of season 4, everything was part of the story, right? But then they didn't want to start the next arc, because it was a new arc, right? The tuning exams were over and they were going to go into the Sasuke retrieval arc. But they didn't want to start that in season 4, so they waited until season 5, right? And so in the middle of that, when they still had, 16 episodes left in their season, they did a filler arc. And it was awful. Like all the filler arcs in Naruto are. And then they did season 5. They did the whole Sasuke retrieval arc, which I think goes into, like, just covers the whole season. And then, as soon as the Sasuke retrieval arc ends, they have 4 seasons of filler arcs. I'm not kidding. Season 6, 7, 8, all filler. Season 9 is only 8 episodes, and it's also all filler except for this tiny section at the end of the last episode where Naruto is like, I'm gonna go train with Jiraiya. See you guys later. And then he does that. And then that's the break before Shippuden. And then Shippuden is 500 episodes long because it is 40% filler arcs. Jesus Christ. And then, like, this is the crazy shit. Not only does Shippuden have like 40% filler, but because there's so much filler, the dub wasn't finished for like 2 years after the sub because they kept having to go through the filler. By the way, the dub in general is fairly good for Naruto. Season 1 has some rough spots where, like, Sakura doesn't know how to say ninja, and she keeps trying to pronounce it ninja like a fucking moron. There's actually a lot of the, like, anime words in there that they're just like, guys, you don't need to do that. Just pronounce it like a regular word. I promise. It's okay. But after, like, season 1, they get their shit together and they know what they're doing with it. But yeah, and as the story goes on, they get more and more brazen with their filler arcs. Like I said, in part 1, they have like 4 seasons of filler. And then, in Shippuden, it's still half filler. But there aren't as many, like... But there isn't, like, an obvious stopping point for the story after which they can just pad the shit out of it. Because in part 1, they waited until the end of the Sasuke arc, and then they were like, yeah, we don't want to stop making money from this, so let's just, do 4 more years of random crap we made up. Uh, but then in part 2 they don't have that. So what they do instead is every time Naruto comes back from a mission, filler arc, right? And most of them are small, but they're all over the place, right? Like every time a mission is over, every time there's even the slightest lull in the story, no matter how little sense it makes, boom, filler arc. And then during the war, the Infinite Tsukiyomi happens, and they take that as an opportunity to show us full ass arcs of everyone's dream sequences. Like, oh my god, why do you hate us so much? That's just years of life wasted. And like, well, because one of the things I did to finally get through Shippuden, because for years I couldn't because so much filler, is I looked up a guide to tell you which episodes are and are not filler, so I could skip around. But what ended up happening is I'd get into an episode and there'd be like 3 minutes of it that wasn't filler. And then I'd get into and then I'd have to skip forward 3 episodes, and then there'd be another 4 minutes of it that isn't filler. I'd have to skip forward again, and I was just like, why? Why would you do this? Viz Media, what is your problem? Who fucked your mom in front of you? What is wrong with you? Anyway. But honestly, that's better than what they did to Bleach, right? Because like I mentioned before, what they did in Bleach is basically in between every arc, they would introduce a filler arc. They didn't do this right away. But, well, after they rescue Rukia, is it right after they rescue Rukia? I think it is. There's a filler arc about these guys called the Bounce. Which, I mean, like, as far as it goes, it's not bad for filler. Like, the enemies have some interesting powers, some interesting motivations. It kind of pretends to have some lore about who the Soul Reapers are and shit like that. But of course, it's all made up lore. It's not, canon lore. And there are some interesting fight sequences, you get to see a lot of the side characters from the Soul Society show up and do stuff, Ikako is there, all the dudes are there, but it just slows down the pace, and there's no reason for it, and it's just weird. And then you go back to fighting the Ronkars and Aizen and everything, and then, but during the Bounce arc, they introduce these dolls who can interact with the Bounce, and or find them because they have a weird spirit energy thing or whatever. It's stupid. So these dolls become main characters who hang out with Cone and do random shit all the time, and it's just and like right before, or I think it might be in the middle of the Rukia rescue arc, it's before. So there's this canon part of the story where, like, right at the beginning when Ichigo is doing the whole spirit detective thing, right before it veers off course, he meets this dumbass guy with a cane who, like, can kind of see spirits, but isn't, like, smart enough to understand what to do with that information. And you know, he's just dressed like a pimp and being all ridiculous. And so anyway, he pisses off a hollow. Ichigo saves him. Blah blah blah. The end of the story, right? But in the anime, they decide that this guy needs to become a recurring character and have constant gag episodes with Rukia's sister and sometimes his dad and stuff like that. And so in the middle of arcs, they'll cut away to like 2 episodes of this dumbass pimp dude hanging out with Rukia's sister, and no one wants to see it. And then they'll cut away to a couple episodes of all of the doll characters hanging out and having fun, and nobody wants to see that. And then they'll get back to the plot for a little while. And then when the plot ends, they'll have another filler arc. And it's just... it ruins everything. It ruins so much of everything. And like, there are so many moments when they're like, you know, gearing up for a plot or something like that, and all of the doll characters will be sitting around talking, and an episode will devote like 5 minutes to their conversation in the middle of all the serious stuff that's happening. And so like, you can't even skip the filler episodes because they put the filler in the canon episodes. And they just make these characters part of the world for some reason. And they're not inherently bad characters, and I don't necessarily hate their interactions with each other, but it breaks the pace so much. It's awful. And, you know, considering that the anime ended up getting canceled because of how poor its performance was, it might make sense, you know? Like, all of this horrible filler and all of these unnecessary filler characters interrupting the main story might be the reason that you got canceled. So I'd love to see that anime approached, you know, by a team that actually wanted to tell the story instead of just sit back and make money. And again, in Bleach, the Sakuga moments are pretty good, right? Like, you know, like I mentioned earlier, if you're watching like Dragon Ball or One Piece, the fight scenes suck. Like, as far as the way they look on screen, they're just like, wow, cool. Because every single fight scene in Dragon Ball, there's a moment where like for 2 whole minutes the characters disappear and you just see these like flashing like white flashes appear on the screen at various points, and the characters look back and forth between them and they're like, oh, they're going so fast, oh. And like, yeah, I kind of get that, the effect you're going for, but what you're really doing is cheaping out on animation and not showing us what the characters are doing, you know? And like 99% of the time, that's how the fight scenes break down, right? Like, they aren't interested in doing any Sakuga, they're just, you know, cutting as many corners as they can. You know, that's why characters stand stock still and talk during the middle of fights. That's why when there is action, they often cut away to reaction shots and, you know, and stuff like that. It's to cut corners on animation. And some of those things have been incorporated into the writing style of the author because they know how that stuff is going to happen in animation and they want it to be, you know, planned for. And so sometimes it doesn't feel that bad, but you can tell when a fight scene has like 2 seconds of punching and 10 minutes of talking, reactions. Oh, now you can see their still shots of their bodies like vanishing in and out of frame, and like, you know, because when they do the whole thing where a character, teleports and punches the other character, they don't show any animation, right? They just show the characters flash on screen in a pose that looks like they're punching. Then they flash away, and then you see more of those, flashy lights on the screen to show that they're moving around. And then the characters flash back in for another still shot, and then they flash away. And like, good God, that's some lazy fucking animation. And I never really noticed any of that stuff when I was watching Bleach or Naruto, which is good. But honestly, I'll take lazy animation over filler. As crazy as that sounds, I'd rather just get the story the way it was meant to be told and have to deal with the fact that the fights don't look that good. Because, realistically, I enjoy watching Dragon Ball more than I enjoy watching Bleach or Naruto. And if the fight scenes were all there was, that wouldn't be the case. Because the fight scenes in Naruto absolutely just completely obliterate all of the fight scenes in Dragon Ball, right? And they do pull off some of the same tricks, right? Probably the most famous fight scene in the entire series is Gaara versus Rock Lee. And you see Rock Lee start to move so fast that he warps around and does all that stuff. But they don't just do still shots, right? They actually do take the time to show him, do the kick, and then they show Gaara's, body move after the kick, and they actually give a shit. It's crazy. So if it were just about the fight scenes and you could cut out all the other crap, Naruto would probably be one of the best anime I've ever seen. But it's not like that. You can't do that. And as it is, Naruto's a pretty shitty anime because it's 40% shitty filler and another 15% flashbacks. And also, realistically, it's not going off the best source material in the world. Kishimoto's not bad, obviously. You don't get to be that successful if you're completely bad. But, I don't know. I just never felt like he was as good as, Toriyama or Oda or Kubo or, And I think part of that is because of where his writing was going. In Naruto, there are clearly moments where he's trying to set up this huge ensemble cast and he's trying to make all these different characters be interesting. But then, it's a shonen and people just want the fight scenes. So he makes the fight scenes and then he moves on and he tries to make these characters relevant again. And then people are like, no, fight scenes. And he's like, okay, fine, fight scenes. And and the fight scenes continue to escalate and get more and more ridiculous because that's what the producers demand. And, before long, it's just all fight scenes all the time. But with Boruto, it's a totally different story, right? In Boruto, yes, there are fight scenes, but he's now famous enough to put his foot down and say, no, I want to do some slice of life shit in my ninja world, so that's what I'm going to do. And he's actually good at it. He's good at the slice of life shit. Whereas I don't think he's quite as good at, building up the melodrama for dramatic fight scenes. And now that he's playing to his strengths, I actually like his writing a lot more, right? If you watch Boruto from the view of, say, a power scaler, it's just mind melting. How has there been this much power creep? What are you guys doing? These guys are still in the academy and they're using nature transformations. Naruto couldn't do that shit until he, like, oh my god. but but if you forget about that shit and you just say, well, these are things that exist in the Naruto world, and this is a slice of life set in the Naruto world, so let's see what these characters can do. Holy shit, it's so good. It's so good for that. And as far as I can tell, the anime doesn't have that much filler yet. In fact, for the first, like, 2 or 3 seasons, they barely had any flashbacks. Starting to fall into some of those old habits at the moment, but man, I really appreciated the fact that, you know, this story could be told about these characters, and it was just about the characters, you know. I think part of the reason he got away with doing that is because he scripted out an ending, right? Like, that first episode opens up with a fight scene that you don't understand at all. And so he gets to build into that, right? And so while he's building into that, he can just let the characters, you know, do whatever he wants them to do, and it's fine, right? He can just build the world and the characters and have interesting things happen, and it's all about personal struggles, right? Like, you know, we spend so much more time getting to know Boruto and Sarada and whatnot than we ever did in Naruto, right? Like, Sarada gets her own arc, Mitsuki gets his own arc, you know. Boruto got his own arc in the movie arc, right? And then all of the other squads, all of the other characters in the squads get their own episodes every now and then. Like, every squad has gotten at least one episode about them, just like showing who they are and how they're fitting into the world and everything. And some of them have gotten 2 or 3 episodes. And it's really cool to see that, you know, to see, like, Kishimoto is totally fine stepping away from Boruto for, you know, a little while and just doing some other stuff and writing his characters in a way that's fun and interesting. And it's just like, wow, I actually enjoy that, you know? So I'm hoping that as we move forward, Viz Media has realized their mistakes, because so far they haven't been doing that with Boruto. And honestly, with a lot of their other productions, there's no fat, you know, like, Viz Media partnered up with Netflix to do Seis Manos, which I reviewed earlier, and that's only 8 episodes. It should have been 13. They would have been able to tell the story a bit better, but fuck, what do I know? You know, and they've got tons of other, you know, small productions that aren't bloated with filler. I think they were just trying to milk that money cow, but now they're in a position where they understand they don't need to do that, and they can produce better stories without doing that. So hopefully in the future, our Viz Media productions will not have those problems. And also, I really, really cannot stress this enough. I want Viz Media to make more adaptations, especially of the more obscure manga. Like, I talked a while back about Angel Sanctuary and why its anime adaptation died, but there are tons of other manga under the Viz Media license that they could probably do something with, and they just haven't. And there's no real reason for it, as far as I know. So yeah, that's the Viz situation as I see it. Also, they should redo Bleach. They should. They should just redo Bleach without the filler and, you know, and let it be. You know. Also, I think they should redo Naruto without the filler because, and if you wanted to do it, you could do it one, as each arc is like a movie, right? And you do the first movie is like the beginnings of a ninja, and it covers like, I don't know, everything up until the forest, probably. Um, I mean, realistically, if you're cutting shit down, not that much happens in the Land of Waves. It's just like a couple of chapters, but and that's about it. But what you could do if you were making them into movies, like I'm thinking along the lines of, how Berserk did the Golden Age arc in 3 films, something like that. So what you could do is you could take uh, the sequence of Obito fighting Minato, right? That whole fight sequence in the village where the Nine Tails, kills them and everything. So that, instead of putting that at the end as a flashback that Naruto sees, just put it at the beginning as part of the opening movie. And then you show Naruto's early life. And then his journey into being a ninja with the Land of Waves and everything. And then you show like the very beginning of the Chunin exams just to show that it's happening and Naruto's in it. And then the second movie can be the Chunin exams. Probably it's hard to say. I would say that if you're going no fluff, you could make these films relatively short, right? Like the first one would probably be like 90 minutes. If you wanted them all to be like 90 minutes, then you could do the Chunin exams right up until you could probably do the whole thing actually, because if you were doing a film, you wouldn't like take a whole lot of time to show him training with Jiraiya and everything. You just like montage it, and so basically you'd just be showing the test at the beginning, then the forest section, then the fight sequence. No, because the tournament would take some time. Like even if you just did highlights, there'd still be a couple battles you wanted to show all of. So yeah, probably it would be the Chunin exams from the beginning up until when the end of the first tournament in the forest temple area. And then the second one would cover the entire, like, Naruto's training with Jiraiya, and then the invasion with the Sand Village, and then the battle with Gaara, and the battle with Orochimaru, and all that. And then you could do one more, that's the Sasuke retrieval arc. And then you'd have the entire first half of the Naruto story, all of part 1, in just 4 90-minute films. I think that would be very doable. I mean, if you want to make the films a little longer than that, you could. For example, like the Golden Age movies are 2-ish hours. So you could definitely do that too. You could make them full-length features if you wanted, but my point is, instead of doing, redoing the episodes and having to deal with all that stuff, you could just, make a production that's like just covers the story. And you could do it relatively quickly. Like 3 or 4 movies for part 1, and then part 2, let's see. Well, I'd say the first movie would probably have to cover the initial Akatsuki attack that almost kills Gaara and all the battles that ensue, and then also probably the fight on the bridge with where Naruto goes beast mode and everything against Orochimaru. And then the second one would have to cover it's hard to say. Probably just would cover a couple more of the Akatsuki fights, right? Like show a couple of their successes and then show them, like probably you would need the fight against Akuma, whatever the fuck his name is, where he dies, and then the one where they get revenge, and then probably also the fight where Naruto pulls off the Rasen Shuriken for the first time. I know it's jumping ahead a bit, but like, there's nothing really interesting that happens in the interim. And so the second one would cover a couple of the Akatsuki battles. And the third one would be probably all about Pain. His backstory, and so you could do, the Jiraiya's early days training with Pain, and then the skip forward to today when Pain attacks. Or no, you'd have to do Jiraiya's early days, then his journey into the land where he gets his butt whooped, and then show Naruto training with the old frog to get ready for the fight. Then the next movie would have to be the fight with Pain, and probably also like the 5 Kage Summit. But like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the summit. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be a little bit harder, but you could easily do like 4-ish films for part 1, and probably like 5 or 6 for part 2, if you wanted to retell the story in that way. The only real problem with this is there are already tons of Naruto movies that have nothing to do with the plot and are just there to make money. So you'd have to find a way to differentiate them, so that people know how to find them and care about finding them. But yeah, that would be a nice alternative to redoing the series, because it would take less time, really. When you're animating a TV series, you have to go, well, one, you have to find breaks in the story that can be episodes, and you have to storyboard around that. And then 2, you have to do each episode, and then each episode has to have an intro and an outro, and all that kind of stuff. So if you do a film, then you can storyboard a much bigger chunk of the story together, and you can animate it, over the course of like 6 months or a year or whatever, instead of the unbelievably tight schedule that they have for animating individual weekly episodes. And then you can, put it out. You can have a theatrical release to sell tickets and stuff, and then you can put it on streaming services. I mean, a lot of anime films have been pretty successful in the last few years doing that. Like every film that has been made in the Dragon Ball verse since Battle of Gods has had that model where they take a while to produce it and then they make it really solid and then they put it in theaters and they sell tickets for a limited amount of time, and then they make the DVD release and the streaming release, and they've been very successful with that, and they've even been able to hit theaters in America for all of those films. In fact, I've seen all of those films in theaters, the last 3 movies, which was all very good experiences actually, except for the Broly movie. That movie looked absolutely god awful on the big screen. It it looked like they didn't even try to animate it. The characters kept changing sizes. The border around the characters kept fluctuating in size, and there were white marks in the middle of the outline for characters. Yeah, because character outlines are done in black, but then they had marks in the middle of that outline as if there was TV static or something, and it just looked like the image was tearing. It looked garbage. Honestly, when I was watching it in theaters, I thought the moments where they do a CGI so they can do a 360 pan was the best shots of the film. And that's not something you should be able to say, because those CGI moments looked like they were ripped straight out of the game engine for DBZ Fighters. Or for Fighter Z, whatever the fuck it's called. So, man, it looked bad. But my point is that if Viz wanted to retell these stories, they could do it in a much more low pressure way by releasing individual films of the arcs rather than just, restarting the series. But even if they restarted the series, it would be a much slower burn. Well, no, it would be a much faster burn, is what I meant. And they'd be able to get through the entire story in a matter of, way less time. Way less time. I'd estimate that if there was no fluff, no filler, no flashbacks, just story, it'd probably take 30% of the runtime to do that. Which is stupid, but yeah, you could definitely do that in 30% the runtime, and then you'd have 200 episodes to cover part 1 and part 2 and do the whole story. And that might sound crazy short considering how long the series is now, but I mean, the series length right now is already 40% just filler episodes, plus all the padding. So, yeah. That's my opinion on Viz Media. That's what they should do. They should cut the filler and release the good version. And here's the crazy part. If they wanted to, they wouldn't even have to make a new series. What they could do is they could take the old masters of the show, assuming they have them, and just cut it down, right? Just cut out all the filler, cut out all the flashbacks, and just condense the episodes into a continuous stream of storytelling. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next live. Laters. Okay, end card time. I'm supposed to tell you to like, comment, subscribe, all that stupid YouTube shit. There's a bell thingy, whatever. I have all the social media stuff: Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Mostly I use Facebook and Twitter to tell you about my Twitch and YouTube uploads. I've got a Patreon, but Patreon is one of those things where people who can afford to throw away money give money to people who can't. And so if you can't afford to throw away money, then you shouldn't be doing that. And if you can afford to throw away money, consider charities. There's a pandemic, there's global warming, there's millions of people in the world who don't have toilets, which is just awful. So I've linked a few charities in the description down below in case you're interested in that. And if you can't donate money to a charity, consider donating some of your time, because that's also very useful. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.